You're listening to the Toe Talks podcast. Turbo cancer, fallacy or fact? Are turbo cancers really an issue? If they are, what's causing them? What does the research say? Who can help? And is there help? Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. We are the rugged, authentic savvy, and you're in the right place. Live free, pursue health. Powerful living starts in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to episode 6 of the Toe Talks podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Toe. So glad you're here. I have a major bone to pick. Something happened yesterday. Today is January 22nd as I record this podcast episode, and I want you to listen to something.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the most exciting things we're working on, using the tools that Sam and Masa are providing, is a cancer vaccine. It's very interesting. It turns out, I'll be quick, all of our cancers, cancer tumors, little fragments of those tumors float around in your blood. So you can do early cancer detection. If you can do it using AI, you can do early cancer detection with a blood test. And using AI to look at the blood test, you can find the cancers that are actually seriously threatening the person. So we can, again, cancer diagnosis using AI has the promise of just being a simple blood test. Then beyond that, once we gene sequence that cancer tumor, you can then vaccinate the person, design a vaccine for every individual person to vaccinate them against that cancer. And you can make that vaccine, that mRNA vaccine, you can make that robotically, again, using AI in about 48 hours. So imagine early cancer detection, the development of a cancer vaccine for your particular cancer aimed at you, and have that vaccine available in 48 hours. This is the promise of AI and the promise of the future.
Promise my foot. So you might be asking yourself, who was that, Dr. Toe? That was Oracle CEO Larry Ellison, the 4th richest man in the world, telling you there is going to be a universal mRNA vaccine for cancer. Where have we heard this before? Does it remind you of anybody? It should. And here's the thing that's probably most disturbing to me is that President Trump, his first full day in office, was standing to the right of this individual as he was breaking this information in a news conference. But wait, it gets worse. So not only is this mRNA technology sitting alongside AI, which is a whole different ball of wax to discuss, and our now sitting president in support of this technology. And why do I say that? Because in this very same press conference, President Trump voiced political support for a $5 billion private sector project called Stargate for the development of mRNA-based health solutions. But the day before, the Biden administration on January 19th awarded $590 million, that's with an M, $590 million to Moderna to develop mRNA flu vaccines with, and I quote, pandemic potential. Now this has huge implications. And you're about to find out just how big as this conversation continues. But the mRNA technology is deadly right now. It is not just not perfected, it is deadly to humans. And yet we have 2 sitting presidents back to back within 24-hour period of time giving millions of dollars or their support towards this very costly initiative. Anything with mRNA technology in it should not be on the market, period. It should be taken fully out of circulation. I'm all for research for trying to perfect this technology, but given what we know now and what we've been through for the past 4 years, we should be pumping the brakes on this, not pumping money into it. But let's move on. This is what Dr. Robert Malone had to say about this very video. And his comments are as follows, and I quote, "These people have no idea how complicated the immune system is, and they have no understanding of the difficulties facing predictive computational immunology, and they have no understanding of cancer immunology. This is marketing, propaganda, and hype," end quote. Yes, it is. Another billionaire telling us what to do, and I'm going to remind you, he does not have a medical degree, just like Bill Gates doesn't have a medical degree. Don't ever forget that. Evil doesn't sleep. You must keep up your guard. Now, before we get into our discussion of turbo cancers, we need to prime the pump for this discussion and talk about certain facts and research surrounding the COVID injections, as this will lead into the subject matter, turbo cancer, fallacy or fact. All right, so first off, let's just talk about some of the facts surrounding these injections. I'm just going to tell you straight up. These injections were doomed to fail from the very beginning, from the onset, before even a shot was put in an arm. Why? Well, because the mRNA technology has never, and I repeat, never been successful in clinical trials. In the research setting, it was an abysmal failure. And this is the reason why there was no animal testing done on the COVID injections. They didn't want any negative data behind it. But the mRNA technology, there's a lot of negative research behind it because the animals died. Go look it up, people. Don't take my word for it. Second, you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot keep up with viral replication. There has never in the history of the world ever been a successful vaccine for a virus. This is why the flu jab doesn't work. It's why they guess every year. I wonder what the variant's going to be next year. It's a complete guess. And FYI, they are starting to combine the flu jab with the COVID jab in one. And don't take any of the COVID tests or flu tests because they are one and the same now. And so the problem is you're always guessing at what the booster should be. The COVID jab was out of date probably within a month of it being given. And they're giving everybody 2 jabs for a variant that now does not exist because it has more than likely mutated. And this is the third problem that doomed these to fail, is that they broke the golden rule of virology. You never vaccinate in the teeth of a pandemic. What? Well, why is that? What does that mean? That means that if you put pressure on a virus to mutate faster, it's going to mutate to the point where those that you vaccinated are now going to get the new variant that mutated that they no longer are resistant against because the virus has discovered a way around the vaccine and created a new variant. By the time you create a booster for a variant, the variant has already changed. Whereas if they had just left it alone and let natural immunity, which is king, run its course, we would have been out of it so quick, so much sooner, with less death and destruction, because viruses burn down. They don't get more viral or dangerous. They get less lethal with time. And that's exactly what happened with COVID. And if you go back and look, we still have COVID now. People don't freak out about it, at least people who have a brain, because COVID is still around, folks. It hasn't disappeared. No. And FYI, I don't think it was as deadly as they said it was, or as contagious as they said it was. But if you look up COVID now, they say, oh, well, it's still around, and people who have, immunity problems should probably get boosted. But everybody else, probably has natural immunity by now. There's herd immunity, and COVID is not an issue for somebody who doesn't have a compromised immune system. But I digress. These things were doomed from the very beginning, no question. And by the way, these are not vaccines. If they were, you wouldn't have to continuously every year get a booster. And especially, I'm going to remind you, these vaccines, which they're not, they're actually gene therapy, are still under EUA, Emergency Use Authorization. They are still experimental to this day. Never been approved fully as safe and effective. Let that one sink in, people. Now let's get into some research behind these injections that specifically targets a certain subject regarding the jabs. And let's just see if you can figure out exactly what I'm looking at, right? I'm just going to spot these off really quickly. You can look in the show notes for links for these research articles so you can look at them yourself. A German researcher found that both the Pfizer and Moderna jabs were toxic to cardiac muscle, and as a result, may significantly, I'm quoting this, may significantly increase the risk of acute cardiac events. Next article was by a Harvard researcher, showed mRNA was stuck in the heart cells of deceased vaccinated individuals. Next study, retroactive study done on 1,000 patients. That means they went back and looked at their medical records. They were randomly picked. All of them had PET and CT scan imaging done for various medical reasons. None of this had to do with anything with the vaccination. It was, they had something going on with them that they needed to look inside their body, whether it be cancer or a heart issue or an organ issue of some sort. It had nothing to do with the vaccination of these individuals. So they randomly found 1,000 patients, male, female, across all ages. 700 of them happened to be vaccinated 2 times over, so twice vaccinated. 300 of them were unvaccinated. And when they began to study these imaging results before and after these individual vaccinations, this is what they found. The imaging captured a disturbing trend. Almost everyone who was double jabbed experienced their heart working 46% harder for 6 months. That's 18 million heartbeats. Any cardiologist worth his weight in salt would have been apoplectic or overcome with anger or even furious at a 15% increase due to a drug inducing these types of changes. We're talking about almost a 50% increase in workload over 6 months. None of these changes were seen in the unvaccinated group. And people wonder why people are suddenly dying. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, when was this research done? It was actually done in late 2023, almost 3 years out from the jab campaign did they discover this. And obviously, I am only focusing on the effects of the jabs on cardiac issues. Let's review what we just discussed. So far, we know the injections were set up to fail from the very beginning and that they have profound negative, long-reaching effects on the human heart. Now, I want you to think back to 2020 and into 2021. What did they tell us even before these jabs were rolled out? What did they tell us about them? Remember in the beginning when they told us, it doesn't leave your arm muscle. You get jabbed in the arm and it stays there. It doesn't go anywhere. It just stays in the tissue there. They lied. Wrong. It didn't stay there, as what was obvious to what I just told you about the research that was done at the end of 2023. But here's the thing, is they knew that they lied. It wasn't that they were mistaken. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is what we know now, and it's far, far worse than what we could ever imagine. The spike protein circulates for at least 2 weeks, and then it seeds itself all over the body, settling into major organs of the body. You ready? Heart, brain, spleen, bone marrow, liver, adrenal glands, and reproductive organs. And this list is really not exhaustive. It affects other organs in the body. Now, I'm going to highlight something. I said bone marrow, and this is the very reason why I did not suggest to my husband to get jabbed when they came out, because I already knew that they would affect the bone marrow. I already knew that the infirmed would be more vulnerable to whatever the negative side effects were to this injection. But then you say to yourself, but Dr. Toe, we didn't know it till 3 years into the jab campaign. We didn't know this information. No, I wish I could say that that was true. But actually, the information I just discussed about it going all over the body and seeding for 2 weeks after the injection, we knew that very early on into the jab campaign in 2021. We knew about the negative effects in human research through the evidence that I just discussed. But here's the most astounding thing for me, is that before a shot ever went into an arm, we had animal research that supported this type of evidence. We already had research saying, whoa, we should be pumping the brakes on this because we have not perfected this technology. And this is why I say they knew and they lied. The regulatory agencies and all the physicians that stood up in front of the mainstream media, and you know who they are, lied. All right, I'm going to stop for a second. I want you to, let's just do a little exercise here. I want you to picture the COVID virus as a military tank. It's got wheels, it's got, armor, and it has this major gun on top of the tank, this howitzer, right? Most of the time, what people do when they're trying to inoculate people from certain things like, vaccines in general, they will take the tire of the disease and put it into the vaccine. But what they did with COVID is they took the howitzer and put it in the vaccine. What am I talking about? The spike protein. It is the most dangerous part. And I repeat, most dangerous part of the COVID virus is indeed the spike protein. Why in the world would you ever want to put that in somebody's body? And it's a toxin. It's a pathogenic protein. It's not supposed to be in the human body. It's the worst thing you could have put it into a vaccine. And if it gets into the bloodstream and the mRNA technology then causes the body to manufacture it uncontrollably, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. I cannot tell you how bad that is. Anything that crosses the blood-brain barrier that is pathogenic is bad. It is going to negatively affect the brain, absolutely 100%. This is why alcohol is so disruptive to people's faculties, because it crosses into the blood-brain barrier. The spike protein crosses into the brain and then proceeds to cause neurological damage. Furthermore, the spike binds to the receptors on our platelets and the cells that line blood vessels, leading to what? You guessed it, clotting and bleeding. Now, the reason why we know all of this information was because of a whistleblower from Canada. His name was Dr. Bryram Bridle. And I want you to listen to what he had to say when he was breaking this information. And let me tell you, he broke it at a cost, because you know what happened to him soon after that. And he continues to be persecuted because of this information that he released. And you can imagine why that is. All right, it's a bit long, but it's definitely worth a listen. Let's listen in.
So this is what it is. The SARS coronavirus 2 has a spike protein on its surface. That spike protein is what allows it to infect our bodies. That is why we've been using the spike protein in our vaccines. The vaccines we're using get our cells in our body to manufacture that protein. If we can mount an immune response against that protein, in theory, we can prevent this virus from infecting the body. That's the theory behind the vaccine. However, when studying the disease, severe COVID-19, everything that you've just described, heart problems, lots of problems with the cardiovascular system, bleeding and clotting is all associated with severe COVID-19. And looking and doing that research, what has been discovered by the scientific community is the spike protein on its own is almost entirely responsible for the damage to the cardiovascular system if it gets into circulation. Indeed, if you inject the purified spike protein into the blood of research animals, they get all kinds of damage to the cardiovascular system, and it can cross the blood-brain barrier and cause damage to the brain. Now, at first glance, that doesn't seem too concerning because we're injecting these vaccines into the shoulder muscle. The assumption, all up until now, has been that these vaccines behave like all of our traditional vaccines, that they don't go anywhere other than the injection site. So they stay in our shoulder. Some of the protein will go to the local draining lymph node in order to activate the immune system. However, this is where the cutting-edge science has come in, this is where it gets scary. Through a request for information from the Japanese regulatory agency, myself and several international collaborators have been able to get access to what's called a biodistribution study. It's the first time ever that scientists have been privy to seeing where these messenger RNA vaccines go after vaccination. In other words, is it a safe assumption that it stays in the shoulder muscle? The short answer is absolutely not. It's very disconcerting. The spike protein gets into the blood, circulates through the blood in individuals over several days post-vaccination. It accumulates, once it gets in the blood, it accumulates in a number of tissues such as the spleen, the bone marrow, the liver, the adrenal gland. One that's of particular concern for me is it accumulates at quite high concentrations in the ovaries. And then also a publication that was just accepted for a scientific paper, just accepted for publication that backs this up, looked at 13 young healthcare workers that had received the Moderna vaccine, which is the other messenger RNA-based vaccine we have in Canada, and they confirmed this. They found the spike protein in circulation, so in the blood of 11 of those 13 healthcare workers that had received the vaccine. What this means is, so we have known for a long time that the spike protein is a pathogenic protein. It is a toxin. It can cause damage in our body if it gets into circulation. Now we have clear-cut evidence that the vaccines that make our bodies, or the muscles, or the cells in our deltoid muscles, right, manufacture this protein. The vaccine itself plus the protein gets into blood circulation. When in circulation, the spike protein can bind to the receptors that are on our platelets and the cells that line our blood vessels. When that happens, it can do one of two things. It can either cause platelets to clump, and that can lead to clotting. That's exactly why we've been seeing clotting disorders associated with these vaccines. It can also lead to bleeding. And of course, the heart's involved. It's a key part of the cardiovascular system. That's why we're seeing heart problems. The protein, it can also cross the blood-brain barrier and cause neurological damage. That's why also in the fatal cases of blood clots, many times it's seen in the brain. And also of concern is there's also evidence of a study. This has not yet been accepted for publication yet, this one. They were trying to show that the antibodies from the vaccine get transferred through breast milk. And the idea was this may be a good thing because it would confer some passive protection to babies. However, what they found inadvertently was that the vaccines, the messenger RNA vaccines, actually get transferred through the breast milk. So it's delivering the vaccine vector itself into infants that are breastfeeding. Also, with this, now we know the spike protein gets into circulation. Any proteins in the blood will get concentrated in breast milk. Looking into the adverse event database in the United States, we have found evidence of suckling infants experiencing bleeding disorders in the gastrointestinal tract.
Thank you, Dr. Bryram Bridle. He broke that information in April of 2021. So essentially what they did was they injected us full of poison. The injection was programmed to kill and injure us. No question. Nothing good about these jabs whatsoever. And this leads us to the question of, do turbo cancers really exist? And the answer is yes, Yes, they do. The incident rate of cancer is higher since the introduction of these injections. The rate of cancer growth is much faster than ever seen before. For instance, if you were diagnosed with a cancer and they said, oh, you've got 5 years, now it's you've got 5 weeks. These cancers have become extremely aggressive, hence the term turbo. Not only have they become more aggressive and occurring at higher rates, but they're finding more than one type of cancer in an individual. When an individual gets diagnosed with cancer, it's not just one anymore. It's 2 or 3, hence turbo cancer. So yes, very much a real problem. Now, let's get on to our question. Do these jabs, these injections, cause turbo cancers? At first, if you were to Google, hey, are these COVID injections causing cancer? You would see over and over again, no, that's a lie. No, that's misinformation. And they were telling you actually a white lie, because the truth is indirectly we had evidence that they were causing turbo cancer, meaning these jabs, these injections put your T cells to sleep. It's like, if there's an MP on duty in the military and they're supposed to police everybody that's coming through an area, which happens to be your body, and the MPs are these T cells. They basically drugged these T cells or the MPs and told them to go back to the barracks and go to sleep. And now these T cells that would normally go, hey, are you a healthy cell or are you a cancerous cell? And if it was a cancerous cell, it would take care of it, annihilate it right then and there. Now these cancer cells that will randomly occur in every single human body remained unchecked. And therefore, yes, the jabs do cause cancer, but indirectly, we didn't have direct evidence until recently. Enter stage right, Dr. McKernan, a genomics scientist with 25 years of experience in his field, made the discovery during experiments in his Boston lab. What did he discover? Well, he was able to gene sequence a cancer tumor, matching the gene sequence to the Pfizer COVID mRNA injection. Let me say that again. He gene sequenced the tumor of a cancer patient and matched it to the genetic sequence of the Pfizer injections. It's over. No question. The COVID jabs cause cancer. No question. You cannot have the genetic information of the Pfizer jab and the genetic information of a tumor be exactly the same and not have one cause the other. It's impossible. So this discovery is being hailed as definitive proof that the COVID mRNA vaccines, I use that term loosely, cause turbo cancer. Yes, they do. And now they want to give everyone an AI-generated mRNA vaccine that supposedly prevents cancer. Do you see the insidiousness of that? Very fallible thinking. So what exactly are the implications of this? I know you're asking, Dr. To, what does this mean? Well, it means no one, and I do mean no one, but especially somebody with active cancer or cancer in the past should have ever been given this jab. No one should have ever taken this jab. It should have never been given EUA, and it should have been taken out of circulation a month after it was put into circulation, really, simply because the vaccine adverse event reporting system was already red flagging it. Okay, I'm not done yet. So let's keep going. This same doctor also found SV40 in the injections. He found the simian, that means ape or monkey, virus 40 promoter in the mRNA COVID injections in the vials that were left over. He did testing on them. Very smart individual. And they contain plasmids, which translates to he found DNA contamination in the Pfizer vaccines. Now, I don't have to tell you how bad it is to have any kind of DNA in your body except your own. Bad things happen. In 2002, The Lancet, which no longer has any kind of clout, published evidence linking polio vaccines contaminated with SV40 to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. According to the authors, the vaccine may be responsible for up to 50% of the 55,000 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cases diagnosed every single year. SV40 known to be oncogenic in humans, meaning causes cancer, including mesotheliomas and cancers of the brain and bone. And wait for it, lymphomas. Yes, lymphomas. And just to bring this point home, around the same time period, lymph node cancer was up 400% from the average in Massachusetts alone. It was the largest cancer group being affected there. And the second most affected were those who had bone marrow cancer. Now, I don't have to tell you that if you have chronic lymphocytic leukemia, that is a cancer of the blood and bone marrow. So you tell me, how disastrous would it be for a patient who's been diagnosed with this to take these injections? What kind of horrific evidence would we see fallout-wise? Well, I just described it to you. Yet here's the kicker. My husband, who was diagnosed with CLL late in 2021, so after all this information was out, in response to my husband asking for ivermectin from his oncologist to be taken prophylactically to protect his health, responded in kind by saying, "You should get vaccinated and boosted." Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think he'd still be here if he had? The odds aren't good. And I won't go into it, but you can listen to the interview regarding Dr. Bridle and his results from another person that was interviewed regarding this information, because he goes into talking about granulation tissue or fatty benign tumors that began to grow out of people's arms from the holes that were made by the injection sites from the COVID jabs. This sounds like science fiction. This can't be real. This isn't really science, is it? Well, you go watch the video and see what you think. But after everything that I've heard, it's completely believable to me. And it's because of angiogenesis. That's a whole nother topic I won't get into. But they talk about it and you can listen to it. It'll be in the show notes. The other thing that I do not talk about on this episode is shedding. The evidence that's coming to light over shedding of people who get vaccinated and shed this vaccine onto other people. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're like, Dr. Toe, I don't think that's a thing. No, it is a thing. And if you want me to do an episode on it, you let me know. Just make a comment down below this episode. And now we come to it. So what, Dr. Toe? So what about all this? Well, first off, if you're an oncologist and you're listening to this, you need to stop telling people to get jabbed. Stop it. Go look at the research and stop it. And then you need to find effective treatments to help counteract the damage that was done by those that did listen to you and go and get jabbed. And physicians need to broadcast the dangers of these injections to all their patients, no matter who you are, where you are in the healthcare system. This includes every healthcare worker. You need to be educated about these things and you need to stop recommending them. They need to be off the market. But the very little thing that you can do, which is huge, is to not suggest or recommend them. And second, this is so important, and this is the main bulk of what I want to tell you. If you have cancer, any kind, but especially if you have blood cancer, you need to do several things for me. Please do these 6 things. Don't get any more COVID injections. And then go download my ebook, Kicking the Viral Load, to help you stay healthier and learn how to boost your immune system, which is now significantly compromised, regardless of what kind of cancer you have. Go get it for free at www.drtoe.com. 3, check into the supplement that's called the Ultimate Spike Detox from the Wellness Company. It has nanokinase in it, and if you have been injected, anybody who's been injected, they should be taking this enzyme, this supplement. 4, blood cancer. If you have blood cancer and you want something to help you, I highly suggest you go to my website, drtoe.com, and check out my CLL early treatment synergistic chemotherapy protocol guide. I think it would be a huge benefit for you. And then go listen to the episodes 2, 3, and 4 from the Dr. Toe Talks podcast, because it talks all about this protocol that I've put together. And then share this podcast and this information everywhere. Share it everywhere, please. Everybody. The truth is absolute and people need to know it in order to know how to fight whatever it is, whatever health issue they are having. If it has been induced by this drug, they don't know, they can't effectively fight against it. And listen, I know all of what I've just said is mainly negative, but I want you to know that there is hope. You must continue to fight the good fight. Do not throw in the towel. It is not hopeless. You are not alone in this fight, and God can do anything. Nothing is impossible for him. A hopeless situation is not hopeless if you have the Lord Jesus Christ in your life. I want to share this with you and hope that that it will encourage you. There's a book called Everyday Gospel by Paul Tripp, Tripp, and I read something the other day by him that just totally encouraged me. He was talking about the horrible plight and life conditions of the Israelites when they were enslaved by the Egyptians in the first few chapters of Exodus. The last part of Exodus chapter 3 is so moving, and Tripp writes this about that, and I quote, "God's people were not alone in this trauma. They had not been forsaken. God heard, God remembered, God saw, God knew. And God would act in mighty rescuing power. Remind yourself today, as you deal with the consequences of life in a fallen world, that God hears, God remembers, God sees, and God knows. Hope knows. In your deepest, darkest, most alone moment, you are not alone. No. God's ears are always attentive to your cries, and he watches over you with eyes of mercy. May the God of the universe sing the song of Psalms 40, 1-3 over you. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he reached down to me and heard my cry. He brought me up out of the pit of destruction, out of the mud, and set my feet on a rock, making my footsteps firm. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to God. Many will see and hear and trust in the Lord. Know that I'm praying for you and I understand. Well, that's a wrap. If you like what you heard, please share. Want to hear more? Please subscribe. And if you're a faithful listener, thank you for all your love and support. Without you, I would not be here. I'm glad you are along on this journey with me. We have each other, and we are not alone. Next episode on the Toe Talks podcast, pandemic or plandemic? As usual, we'll review the data and the evidence. Pursue health, live free, and breathe deep. Until next time, everybody, this is Dr. Toe signing off. Important disclaimer. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I am not a medical doctor and I do not diagnose, advise, or treat. This podcast is not intended for the substitute of advice from a personal physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. It is not intended to be used or relied upon for any diagnostic or treatment purposes, or to be used as a substitute for professional diagnosis, treatment, or conventional medical therapy. None of the statements made in this podcast have been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions or for guidance about specific medical conditions. Listen responsibly.